Okay, we're ready to roll. Welcome to Wisdom and Torah. We're doing this podcast, and I'm trying to bring as many people as I can think of who know a lot more than me. And this week I have I can call him a dear friend, my brother, and
Amen.
also a teacher, my teacher in ancient Near Eastern history, uh, Professor Mark Chavalas. How are you, man?
I'm doing well out in California this week, and I have my Yankee book, my Dodger book up there. I guess you can tell. I was looking for a Yankee book for the last time they won the World Series, but evidently it would probably be a clay tablet, so it's really really old. So I couldn't find one. So sorry.
Okay, that's funny, man.
Yeah.
That's it. Just reminder, Judge went deep yesterday.
Well, good. The Dodgers won too, so it's okay. The
All
Dodgers,
right.
I think, a game ahead of the Yankees.
That's okay. We'll see what happens at the end.
Yeah.
All right, man. Hey guys, we're going to talk about a very interesting topic today. As you know, I've been researching temple for 25 years now. I've been really studying it deeply with my teacher Joseph Good since 2000. I can't remember 2009. So I've been doing that a long time. And this last uh, few years, I've been focusing a lot more on the function of the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. And I got connected with okay, let me tell you a little bit of the story. And you included in this, by the way. Okay,
Oh,
so I don't know how to put both of us on the screen at the same time. Trying to figure that out. I don't know how to do that. Be kind of nice. Let me see. See if I could do it. Spotlight for everyone. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, so I don't know how to do it, so forget it. Um, so I was on Facebook. Whoops, turn that one off. All right, so I was on Facebook and I figured, I was reading one of your articles from the IVP, a little, short. And I
yes.
said, I wonder if I could reach out to these people. And I sent you a messenger just out of the blue because I found you on Facebook. Actually, I don't know how you saw it, but you saw it. I did
It
the
took
same
me,
thing,
it
huh?
took me a few months, but yes.
Took a while, but you answered. I'm like, okay. Then I figured, let me try to reach out to some of the other guys. Some of them answered, some of them didn't. But one of the people who did answer was Professor Roy Gain.
Yeah.
And as you know, he is a direct student of the guy who wrote these compendium, 3 volumes, Jacob Milgrom, which, by the way, I'm showing it because it's going to be one of the resources we're going to be speaking about today.
Yeah.
So it's from the Yale Anchor Bible Commentary. Highly recommend that
Yeah.
particular one. It's
Yes.
3 volumes of the book of Leviticus. It's probably the most in depth, and out of that, it come a whole bunch of writers, scholars like David P. Wright, who's one of his students too.
Yes. Yeah.
This is a good book about disposal of impurity. I like this one. And
Yeah.
then I have,
If you're into that, yeah.
yeah, I know. Did you like this?
Of course, it's a good book. He's very thorough. He knows all about that stuff.
But
Uh,
it's like in the temple. In the temple, they take the animals, carcasses, and the ashes outside the camp. But the Bible doesn't specifically tell you the reason why, or even connecting it with other nations, or what the meaning of it is. It's like everyone understood what that meant at
that's
that
exactly
time.
right. Yeah.
But he did a good job connecting all the little dots. It's a little intense reading, though.
Oh, yeah. And
Never realized there was so much information on that.
yeah, I haven't actually sat down and read it. I've used it as a resource when I need it. But
Yeah.
uh,
Let me put it this way: I'm reading it, but I have to go in spaces
yeah.
because it's deep. Anyway, so
Yeah.
then I went into Blood Ritual in the Hebrew Bible by William Gilders. I really like him. It wasn't as confusing. A lot of prefix and nouns and verbs in the Hebrew, and now I know why. Yes, you were mentioning about the Akkadian language.
Yeah.
Then when I was talking to Professor Gain, we're going to meet next week.
All right.
He gave me
Good.
an opportunity to do a interview him in regards to Leviticus.
Good.
So, and I'm glad that I have your support and recommending all these people.
Well,
And he
good.
recommended him, huh?
Yeah. Well,
He
he can.
recommended.
Well, what I was going to say is he can probably undo most of what I tell you today. But
You
it's all
know,
right.
So he recommended Jace Collard.
Oh, Sklar, yeah.
Yes, Clark. And I read his book while I'm on the flight. And wow, it's a lot of stuff. So I'm Professor, I made a decision.
Yeah.
I made a decision. I don't know if I told you before, but in the last 30 years, I tried to be goal driven. As you know, I was a baseball player, baseball scout. I've been doing martial arts and different systems. So what I do, I have short-term goals and long-term goals. And one of the goals that I wanted to accomplish was, and I'm still pursuing that, is the knowledge of temple protocols and functions and structure. And I think I have the great teacher for that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a niche that we may look more into connecting ancient Near East. That would be the book of Leviticus. Well, as you know, is not really the focus of either mainstream Judaism or Christianity, although they always refer to. It's kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
Yeah, exactly right.
So I'm kind of giving myself a long-term goal to really see how far I could get understanding a little bit better. More for me as a teacher, I think it's important that we try to understand as much as we can. But where do you come in? You come in because you're able to bring all this knowledge of the information you've compiled over those 40 years studying ancient Mesopotamia. And I really believe that to understand the book of Leviticus, we must consider going back to the time frame when all these events are taking place, because there's so many parallels that I think many people, when they read the Bible, they never consider that there are other countries around Israel that were doing sacrifices, and many of the similarities are uncanny. The ultimate intention was different in regards to the worship of God, but the rituals were very similar, and that sometimes can be a stumbling block for certain people.
Well, that's exactly true. And I think it really is no different than anything else we've talked about in our interviews over the past couple of months, is that the difference between Israel and the ancient Near East usually is the meaning behind the ritual, not so much the ritual itself. And I probably brought this up a long time ago, but it probably would be relevant right now just to talk about it very quickly. But in 2 Kings 10, when Jehu uh, is able to trick the uh, priests of Baal by going in and beginning to perform a sacrificial ritual, it's probably because the ritual was, at least on the surface, looked the same as an Israelite ritual. So he could fool them, and of course he killed them all. But so again, on the surface they look similar. The meaning behind them is different. That's why I sent you those two articles by Skurlock, um, talking about blood and animals and the like. And of course, the thing that you were really interested in talking about was the whole issue of blood and the atonement,
Yeah.
and how that works, because we have the same concept in Mesopotamia, but I think the meaning behind it, as usual, is different. And one of the big differences, I think, is really in terms of covenant. No, the Mesopotamians have covenants, but it's usually uh, two human individuals who have the covenant, and then they invoke the gods to make sure that things are going to work out. Of course, the really unique thing about Israel is having a covenant with a divine being, the divine being, and I don't really see any parallels to that. Uh,
I haven't seen anything,
yeah,
anything at all. I say that's the big difference between the Torah and any other ancient document, really.
yeah, yeah. The Babylonians don't make a covenant with Marduk,
Right.
or
So,
in that.
so do you think that the distinction and who originates the covenantal relationship is is a big difference? But that means that now the sacrifices are redirected from the way the people believe to the underworld gods and demons and whatever, to the one who initiated the covenant. So it's a
Right.
direct relationship then.
Yes, exactly right. Uh, and so I guess the first question is that is hard, especially for a modern, to understand, is, so why do they still keep on doing it? Is because that was the system. The system isn't being destroyed. The meaning behind it is what is going to be changed. with Israel.
When I cut up, I cut on to something kind of interesting. In the Torah portion where we're talking about, the Torah portion is called Balak, the story of Balak and Balaam,
Yeah,
Balak and Balaam. And in the storyline, you see uh, Balaam was the royal messenger of Balak. And it was peculiar because Moses or Israel is not even involved in that exchange there.
right.
It looks like two kings, Balak and the God of Israel, and there's a messenger in between. And then the messenger does something really interesting that I got to be honest with you, I didn't really quite catch on until I was reading a Jewish source that mentioned it. He's building 7 altars, he's doing sacrifices. But then he says there's no divination of witchcraft in Israel.
Yeah,
And in the book, it says, well, they used to read the liver. That's why he's doing sacrifices,
yeah,
reading the liver, and he doesn't see anything, and that's why he's saying there's no witchcraft if that's true, then we need to compare the what we call the sacrificial system in Israel in a complete different light of the way that it was perceived by the nations surrounding Israel. And
yeah.
I don't think we do that enough.
Well, no, I no, because it's not only is it hard, you don't expect those who are, in Judaism and Christianity to be interested in what the surrounding nations are doing. You want to find out how it's relevant to us. But as you well know, the only way to do that is to find out what its, contextual relevance was, and that's not an easy thing to do. You have to learn these strange multiple languages, and Balak or whatever he's clearly a Mesopotamian divination priest, living.
Balaam, you mean Balaam?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Balaam. Yeah, Balaam is a Mesopotamian divination priest, and we've even found in the uh, middle of the early Iron Age, they found some documents, uh, fragments of texts concerning uh, him in the area of Israel. And so that's Joanna Hackett is the person who published much of that stuff. And so he was evidently quite well known, which I think puts an even more interesting spin on that whole situation. The fact that he's bested by the stupidest animal on the planet, a donkey. Um, and in Mesopotamia, it was not all that unusual for through some sort of magical rituals to have animals speak. And so that puts an even more ironic spin on this, is that here's Balaam going, and a stupid donkey that he didn't have speak through divination is now speaking to him, because of God. Um, and of course, any reader is going to look at that. Wow, that's pretty funny. The smartest guy in the world just got bested by the stupidest animal on the planet. And even today, when I was in the Middle East, I just remember when I would mess around with my workers and learning with my, first or second grade Arabic, I found out very quickly that I could mess with them and tease them and trash talk, but you don't call them a donkey.
Yeah.
That was you don't mess with their mother and you don't call them a donkey. And I said, okay, it's cool, I get it, but
Ah,
it's all
so
right.
good.
You're an ajanabi, you're a foreigner, but now you know.
Now you know. You
Yeah,
know, it's interesting. Uh, my research that I'm doing now in the book of Leviticus, specifically Leviticus 17:11, which you are very grateful to be willing to exchange with me on this. And that's the reason why we're doing this today.
yeah,
I asked you if you can, give us some insight from ancient Near East perspective. But Roy Gain, in his book, Leviticus and Numbers, NIV application commentary,
yes,
when it comes to Leviticus 17:11, he says something interesting that I've noticed. I've noticed that all the scholars, that's the main contention of the scholars, trying to figure out the structure of that Hebrew text.
yes,
And in Leviticus, he says here on the page, I think, it doesn't tell me, I have it on logos, says Leviticus 11:12, I'm sorry, 17:11 is unique in the Hebrew Bible in that it explicitly assigns the sacrificial blood the function of ransoming human life.
Yes.
Some scholars contend that kipel also carries the idea of ransoming. They use the I think the verb or the noun, I can't remember, kofel, which is the same word
Yes.
as in the Ark of Noah and the Ark of Moses,
Yes.
protecting them.
Yes.
That's interesting. And it says whether it is accompanied by nefesh or not. However, what sense would it make to ransom a non-human object, such a part of the sanctuary, like Leviticus 16, 16, and 18, in context where the objects or persons receive atonement or kipel? Now, what is interesting is they come to the assumption that these particular words carry a different type of meaning based on the function of blood and the altar.
Yeah.
Now, this is what really intrigued me. Yeshua said, the Messiah, he said, and I'm going to read it here real quick and allow me to share. And give me a few minutes to present this because I really want you to go on from your perspective, and I want the audience to follow why I want it so desperately for you to share with us. Here, I made some notes based on Leviticus 17:11. In Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, the Messiah says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many.
Yeah.
The same thing you have it in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, same verse. And then 1 Timothy 2:6 says, who gave himself a ransom for all, the testimony at the proper time. First Peter says, because you know that you were redeemed. Now, it's interesting. Then I began to trace that word redeemed throughout the Bible. And I'm going to share with you what that is.
Yeah.
And then in First Corinthians 1:30, it says, but from him you are a Messiah, Yeshua, who became wisdom to us from God for righteousness and sanctification and redemption. Now, as you know, redemption to many people, they give different definitions.
Yeah.
But when I went back to the Greek language, it was really peculiar. The word there is litron.
Yes.
And you know what that means price or release, ransom.
Right.
And it's actually connected with the price that you pay for a release of a slave. That's another word that can come out of that too. So when you trace the word redemption throughout the New Testament, and in the book of Revelation 5:9, and thank you for the time. I think it's important that we connect this with the New Testament because the language is consistent, and we're going to see how that connects with the ancient world to find some kind of, And in Revelation 5:9 says, and they were singing a new song. You were worthy to take the scroll, to open its seals, because you were slaughtered and bought people for God. Now, what's interesting is the word bought is the Greek word agora or agorazo, which is in Ephesus was the huge area. Let me show you here. The huge agora. That's right, agora, which is this is a huge area in Ephesus where it was known for slave trade and buying slaves. Yeah. That's quite interesting. So what I did, Professor, I went back and I started looking at the word apolitrosis, which is the word for redeemed.
Right.
In 1 Corinthians 1:30.
So it's the same root word that you just looked at with the preposition
Yes, sir.
in the front of it. Yeah. Apo.
Yes, sir. Now, when I read all the verses that you find in the New Testament with that word, now it makes sense. It's a ransom type. It's like releasing somebody from slaves. And now Paul clearly talks about how we have been released from the penalty of death.
That is very interesting. Now, but the Hebrew equivalent of that is not Kipur. Is it deror?
Kofel.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
See, that's the connection that the word kofel, which is the argument the scholars are having with kipel and their meaning within the Hebrew structure of Leviticus 17:11. Then when you trace the words, and then you have the word aphesis, we talked about this before, a remission, which is connected with the Jubilee. And by the way, in Ephesians 1, aphesis and litron is connected in the same verse.
Interesting.
So this is why it's so important to get to know the Mesopotamian ancient Near East. There has to be a connection of similarities and a consistent message that they all understood. How come we don't know it? That's
Yeah.
really what I'm concerned about.
Yeah. No, I think that you're absolutely right. And so um, I wasn't aware of that word. And so that's interesting. Um, looking at um, the Hebrew word, the Kippur, certainly it's found in Akkadian, and that's the word that is used for um, the term literally in Akkadian, kaparum is the verb, but it's in the causative form, kuparum. And that means to wipe, yeah, wipe or rub off something. That's what it means in the in the generic. That's the generic meaning of the term, but
Yeah,
it's used extensively in rituals, and so it has more of an abstract meaning of wiping something away that's perhaps internal, or like it says, pollution or whatever. And so it's a perfect answer here. And
yeah.
it's fascinating that it's found in myriads of different rituals. And so you've got the Akitu festival there, which is the New Year festival. Um, uh, in fact, you're right. In fact, it says the ritual is not entirely understood, but it's included in the cleansing of demonic uncleanness from the sanctuary, rubbing and wiping. In fact, they were as much or more so obsessed with purification of every aspect of their lives, including their house, as let's say the Israelites were. Think of the Israelites making sure that their house is absolutely cleaned of impurities. And it's, of course, still done, during a Seder or what have you. Well, Mesopotamia, we're finding out, was exactly the same way, is that they probably could have spent their entire life purifying their, their surroundings. Um, and a lot of it has to do with these very strange rituals that I can just bring up briefly. Um, uh, the first one is called, this is by Kaplis, the Akkadian Namburbu rituals. Yeah, really, really odd. Um,
What is it called? What?
Namburbu.
Don't move it.
I'm not. Uh, this is probably the best overview uh, of them that's in a little monograph
Okay.
by Kaplis, and he collected all of them. This is just a sampling of them with this publication, which is, by the way, Andina. This was the publication that my Professor Bucciolati has, and I did some publishing in this too. But anyway, these rituals are, I suppose you could say, they're like anti-divination rituals. So let's say in fact, the word actually it's a Sumerian word. It means it's releasing, and it could be it's cleansing. But in the rituals, um, uh, well, first of all, if you have a bad omen, you think about it today, as little kids, and I don't know how if it was the same, let's say living in Puerto Rico, but in America in the old days, if it was Friday the 13th, you would make a joke, oh, it's the bad luck day, or if a
Right.
black cat would run in front of you, or you walk under a ladder, or you step on a crack. Little things like this, of course, are all survivals from really medieval omens, and bad luck days, etc. Um, in Mesopotamia, there were myriads of them. And so if you have a bad omen, whether it's liver divination or just an outside divination or a barking dog or a snake that came into your area, etc. If you have a bad omen, there's a way to release yourself from it, and it's a Namburbo ritual. Oh, by the way, all these are going to cost money. I'm just an average, Mesopotamian householder, and a snake slithered nearby. I've now got to go get an incantation priest who will now perform this ritual. And of course, the ritual is almost always an incantation. They've got to
Right.
chant it or sing it um, to get rid of it. And I'm thinking, it's kind of a pretty good racket first we set up bad omens, and then which you have to pay for to find out what they are, and then you have to pay to get rid of the thing that I just made up for you.
Huh.
If
So
I'm being a little cynical.
yeah, because I noticed because that article that we were just reading um, is actually from the ancient text for the study of the Hebrew Bible. Let me.
Yeah.
We were talking for that common ground, common
Oh,
denominator.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. And it's one thing that I've learned studying your research in the IVP and all the stuff. Every time I read, John Walton, you and all the scholars agree that it had a lot to do with demonology and the evil
Yes.
spirits up
Yes.
to prayer worship, and also, and it's interesting that there's like Yeshua kind of did that when didn't do divination. Talking about he kind of using the mindset of the people to send the message when he healed the guy from Gadara,
Yeah.
and then he brings out the spirits, and then he puts it on the pigs and throws them in the Sea of
Yeah.
Galilee. What
Yeah.
people don't realize is the pigs were a representation of the 10th Legion. That's the banner of their, and it's like he's basically letting them know they are unclean. They're on the
Yeah.
underworld, It's kind of interesting. The gods, because of the Decapolis being worshipped on that side of the Sea of Galilee. So everything carries over, and sometimes we don't see that.
Oh yeah, it has I mean, Mark knows exactly what he's writing about there, and everybody who's reading it knows. And again, it doesn't have to be expressed. In fact, the whole point is that the fact that it's subtle means it might go over the head of the pagans. Um, but so in this Namburbi ritual, let me just read one. It's very brief, and this one was mentioned by Milgram, but he failed to provide a reference for it, so I had to dig it up on my own. It was about the only time I ever found that he didn't provide a reference for something, because
Okay.
otherwise he's so incredibly dense.
Where'd you get it from? The reference?
Well, I can send it to you. It's the same guy, Kaplis, who wrote a bunch of articles. He collected a couple hundred Namburbi rituals, and he published them a little at a time in a journal called Orientalia. And
Ah, okay.
and so here's one. You're going to love this. So here's the problem is that I think this one is about a snake, if I'm not mistaken. And here's what you do about it. Here's the ritual. You roast a wall spider, a gee fly, and then something broken, and a scorpion. You bray them together. You mix all of them together with a bat's blood. You smear the concoction on the doorpost of your house and your door handles. Um, and then it goes on about talking about other things, and it says, and basically these are instructions for the incantation priest to do it correctly. Um, and so, of course, and in a very brief little note, Milgram makes the passing reference. Oh, this sounds a little like the Passover.
Exodus. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Passover. Yeah.
and of course, but you think about it. God does not explain why he's doing it in Exodus. I mean, he gives the final result for why it works, but everyone living at that time would have understood exactly what's going on here. Oh, he's protecting the house from the evil that's going to be coming in. And of course, what's the evil? It's the death angel, whatever,
All right.
whatever that is.
You know what's interesting? So, the premise that that blood was life was not unique to
Yes.
Israel.
No, not at all. No.
So, okay. So you have the blood on the doorpost. The Egyptians would have done it. I know the Bedouins would do it every spring to avert evil.
Yes.
So this was a custom. In weddings, they used to put blood on the doorpost too, in Armenia, in some of these places. So now the contrast would be how God perceives the ransom, life for life, compared to the ancient world, how that would work.
Yeah.
So, okay, do you think that is this more of a psychological thing that God is trying to convey to his people, not to be afraid of the evil influences or what ancients perceive was evil or whatever?
Yes, because I mean, the more I think about it, living in that environment must have been terribly frightening every aspect of your life was a potential disaster, even
Mhm.
if it was um, but even if it didn't look bad. So in other words, a thunderstorm, a barking dog, a clashing cymbal. And by the way, this continues on to into the Greek and Roman world.
That's true.
It doesn't change at all, but it's like, it would be like step, like the old adage, step on a crack, break your mother's back, but everywhere you go, there's a crack. And so you can't avoid them. And so you're thinking, how am I going to stop this? How am I going to help my
Yeah.
mother out? Oh, I've got to go to the incantation. In other words, it's everywhere. And so here's God, in a sense, what God is doing is as he does with everything else, he transcends it. He doesn't alter their he doesn't take their whole culture and upend it with a steam shovel. He transcends it and saying, go ahead and do whatever you want, but I'm above all of this. And that's the whole point of of God being a transcendent being. He's not affected by um, the things. Of course, when it got completely out of hand, that's when God has to say, like in Leviticus 18 and 20, etc. There are some things that are happening that are absolutely, so disgusting and terrible. They're the abomination, the toevah. You know, that those have to be addressed and
Right.
rid of. But everything else, and one of them, of course, is the life of the blood.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, as you know, in mainstream Christianity, as well as the circles that I teach, uh, demons is prevailing as a message. In the Torah, however, all I saw was two verses, I think, that God alludes to do not sacrifice to demons. That's
Yeah,
it. Doesn't give you any explanation. And
yeah,
I always ask the question, why is it that the Torah doesn't specifically expound much on it? And I came to the conclusion that it's done on purpose because they have no authority in God's plan of His kingdom. It's to be devoid of that.
yes.
So, so would I be correct to to do my research in light of that position of the ancient Near East, understanding that if divination is not allowed, meaning that the temple had to be devoid of divination, and if mourning was the center of this world here, the temple has to be devoid of mourning rituals, and so on and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, and I think I brought this up before, and it's probably because of how divination is defined. If divination is trying to understand the will of the heavenly entities, then the only divination that is acceptable is the one that God has deemed accessible, the Urim and the Thummim, or
Yeah.
or the like. And so, um,
Do you think, I'm adding to that, if I may, do you think that's why in the Bible, and specifically the Torah, the requirements of a prophet is so strict because they're actually speaking on behalf of God, and you don't want to make sure that you don't commit ma'al or transgression against the word of God.
yeah, I think that you're
I mean, that's
exactly.
quite interesting.
Yeah, that would make sense because, of course, and we can do this, maybe do something on prophecy at some point. We don't have any prophetic text. We have letters, both from two periods, from from Mari in the Old Babylonian period, which would be roughly the time period of Abraham. And Mari is a West Semitic town up in Upper Syria, inland Syria. And then in the Neo-Assyrian period, during the period of the empire, we have letters where they talk about prophets coming and speaking, and they are on the surface remarkably similar to the prophets in Israel in terms of their relationship with the crown, uh, or not, like someone like Amos, who I think when he says I'm not a prophet, he's probably saying I'm not part of that prophetic guild.
Right.
I'm not a professional. I'm just a farmer who God decided to speak to. Um, but the outward look of these prophets are remarkably similar to what we find in the Bible.
What interesting. So going back really quick, I want to make a connection
Yeah.
between prophecy, because we know Samuel served a dual role. We know that the priests of Israel were actually the royal messengers. They were the prophets.
Yes.
By and large, the majority of the prophets in the Bible were the priests. When the high priest was corrupt, then God will call somebody else who was not necessarily of the stock to still bring the message. But it's quite interesting because then we have to ask the question, what was the role of blood in the, Akitu or the Kipuru man said in the Mesopotamia of atonement? What they're atoning for? Because in the Bible, it's to cleanse the temple of its impurity according to Leviticus 16. Is it
Yes,
the same or demonology more so?
and I think I think it's analogous to what's happening in Mesopotamia. You have blood rites, and of course, when you would sacrifice an animal in Mesopotamia, you would do the same thing. The entrails, all of the blood had to be washed off. And by the way, when you did that, you took all the material and you disposed of it.
Hmm.
And that's what one of the things that Wright has in that book about the disposal of impurity. That in a sense, what you're doing is that whatever impurity there was, you're putting it with this thing, and then you're getting rid of it, and you have to dispose of it properly uh, in the correct way. And of course, they've tried to make connections between that and what happens with the the scapegoat um,
Yeah.
in Leviticus 16, which, by the way, has some remarkable parallels.
To the
As
Akitu.
Yeah, well, even earlier,
Yeah.
the scapegoat ritual at Ebla. I'll have to send you this article. Maybe I can find it here um, while we're going. Let's see if I can find it quickly enough. Um,
Hey, I want to, while you're finding that, I want to submit something to
yes,
you, see what your opinion is.
sure.
We're looking at two goats, one for the Lord and one for Azazel. Everyone focuses on the one for Azazel.
Yeah, of
By the
course.
way, in the Bible, that's the only one that takes away the sins of Israel.
Right.
It's only done once a year by the high priest. The people would not do that anyway. So, but people forget about the other goat, in which none of the meat was eaten, and the carcass was not put on the altar. It was actually thrown outside the gate. It was the blood that was taken inside the Holy Holies.
That's right.
So
That's
it's really the blood that matters here. The other one, do you think that's a question? The other one, do you think is more for Israel, for peace of mind, for conscience sake?
that I hadn't thought of it, and so my first knee-jerk reaction would be yes.
I
Um,
mean, if we think about the mysteries and how fearful they lived in regards to demonology, and it says to Azazel, and they assume it's a demon, right?
right.
So I mean, I think it will be in a way, God's sense of humor, if I may say that, of using something everyone understands. Says, okay, you see, he put the hands on it, he forgives you, all repented, I see it. Now let me send them away, so you'll know that I forgot, it's cleansed. But the blood of the animal that better be done right. If not, the priest will die. That's the one.
Well, they have done a study of Azazel and found that in Canaanite rituals, it looks as if it was originally a Canaanite demonic force.
Ah,
And of course, and that's exactly how it's looked at in Jewish literature. You look at First Enoch and other
yeah,
places, Azazel is one of the
yeah.
bad guys. And so what they're doing is they're making rational conclusions about what this was. And so they recognized that this thing had been demythologized in the Bible, but it originally was a personal name of a demonic force. And so um, I don't know
So you
what,
think the Bible is a lot more simpler than we probably try to
oh
make
yeah,
it because it's a contrasting God's values and God's ways compared to the nations surrounding the people of Israel.
yes. And it just shows us we again, we say it every week because of our huge disconnect. Uh,
Yeah.
that's what's going on. And by the way, this is why, and I think it's often easily discounted when Jesus comes and in the Gospels, he does so many things that seem to be sort of superfluous for a modern audience. He's constantly talking to demonic forces and engaging them and of course putting them in their place. And you're thinking, well, why do I care about that?
It's more chaos. He's trying to fix the
Yes.
chaos.
Well, he's showing exactly the point is in that world, that was what was dominating everything in every aspect of every person's life were the demonic forces which made them live in constant fear. And so here's this person who has power over all that. That's
Yeah,
the most important. That's probably even more important than whether I'm sick or healthy or fed, because this other thing was wearing down on my mental, emotional, and spiritual state so terribly. And now here's this person who comes,
yeah,
and so he's more than just a faith healer. He's an exorcist, and of course that's what he's accused of,
right.
by the Jewish leadership.
He's
And
sent by God to restore the cosmos.
when you look at um, how things are happening in third world countries where the gospel is being preached, they will often talk about things like that. Now, I know you have that Pentecostal background. I do not, but I'm certainly open to listening and finding out that these people, are, they evidently have all sorts of issues with demonic forces,
Oh yeah.
especially in areas that are not, that had not never been touched by any monotheistic
So,
tradition at all.
yeah, Kundalini, the
Yeah.
Kundalini rituals and the religion, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. You made a comment that he was accused. Yeshua was accused of. You just said it,
Exorcism.
exorcism. And what when I finally caught on, um, understanding a little bit of the culture of the ancient Near East in regards to the rituals, and I began to study the temple, it's what a contrast. One is about life, the other one's about death. One is about order, the other one's about chaos. The one is about shalom, peace. The other one's about fear, constantly, mysteries. And then the temple was all in the open, so they can see the slaughter, they can see everything being done, and it's like what an amazing way to send the message without really uh, forcing the people to live in fear. It was actually the opposite. You know, it's kind of okay. So, do you think that many people in the denominational world sometimes are focusing on the fear? For example, the message, accept Jesus, if not, you're going to go to hell. I mean, was that any different than saying, believe in Marduk, if not, the demons are going to attack you, they're going to kill you?
Well, yes and no, because of course, um, it's not so much. I mean, I think there's a difference. You certainly pronounce a loyalty to Marduk, but the thing is, I can also make a loyalty oath to any particular deity,
Yeah.
and so it's really not the same. The
Do you
ex
think that, but do you think the fear attached to it is the difference?
Well, the fear is that Marduk. Um, I better stay on Marduk's good side because he might help. Uh, he might help with the exorcist who will stop the demonic activity that's
Right.
bothering me. And by the
Right.
way, those are anti-witchcraft witch rules. They're called maklu, MAQLU.
Yeah.
Uh, and we found a couple, there's dozens of texts with hundreds of the rituals in there, for the manuals. Zvi Abush, Abusch, has Israeli scholar, a Syriologist who has dealt with them. He's written books and books on Mesopotamian magic. He's like the top guy. He's probably about 80 now. But uh, these these rituals are there to help the person. So of course but you have to be on good terms with Marduk, but it's really not the same thing. They're not making a covenant with their gods like Israel is.
Right.
That's
Right.
and of course it's interesting to realize, as I've been studying in Genesis 15, it's God who of course who makes the initiation with Abraham, who very well could have been a Babylonian priest, for all I know.
Yeah.
In fact, it would make it even more sense. In fact, I was thinking it would be in some respects kind of like Paul. Here's Paul being at the top of Jewish intelligentsia, religious intelligentsia, and then hit by a revelation by God. It would be fascinating to think of Abraham in the same way, being
Yeah.
uh, in that leadership, but I don't know.
I think Mrs. Smith was saying Because we wrestle not with flesh and blood. That is exactly true. We're not wrestling with those fears. I mean, what I found that the Torah is trying to convey to us a message of confidence that you're in a covenantal relationship. He gives you the instructions. If you follow those instructions, you live in the realm of life. You don't have to be fearful of those things. And I think the message in the first century writings, the New Testament, I think is consistent, specifically as we know the Greco-Roman world. It was following suit as in the ancient Near East. So many things were similar in
And
regards to the gods.
and I think that, and by the way, this is not simply a denominational issue. I think it's anyone living in the 21st century. We, even if you're the most faithful and religious person, it's hard to break out of a secular mindset. So we
That's true.
think, we think of the universe, we separate things out. We're much like the deists, thinking that, God made the universe, but he may not be intimately involved in the daily workings of our life. Well, we think he is, but on a physical standpoint, we see a separate thing, it's a separate issue, and then we have sort of gotten rid of demonic forces, and so they're not relevant any longer. They're something that they used to think about in the old days. And so, you're sick, you have a demon. Well, today that means you might have a mental issue. So we have a very different vocabulary, and because of that, it's very hard for us to relate to that situation and understand that
Got
it
it.
really isn't any different. Nothing
Right.
really has changed.
So what to them was a demon today may be just a psychological issue or a sickness or response to something, because that they would read. So when I read the Torah, then Torah is actually trying to maybe give you the instructions. For example, if you eat blood, and what the blood can do to the body. They didn't have the medical research they have now, or certain types of foods that create certain kinds of reactions in your body. I mean, do you think then that the Lord is trying to use these principles to keep His people separated from the environment, yet they live in this world?
My answer is that might be a byproduct of it. That
Yeah,
certainly never implied anywhere in scripture that that's the reason for it. Don't eat pigs because they're disgusting for you. It never says anything like that. And so it's interesting that we've learned things like that. Um, but but I think if you superimpose that idea back
yeah,
onto the text, it could be potentially dangerous, because now you're basically putting a 21st century uh,
gotcha. Yeah,
rationale on it, and even if the rationale is correct, uh, but because think about it, Rico, we're uncomfortable with the idea of what the real purpose was, and the real purpose was a supernatural purpose, that God is, talking about the blood and covenant and everything, it all has to do with the heavenlies,
yeah.
and we get uncomfortable with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's true. Like, for example, we're talking about the pig, right? And then you read the Hittite ritual. They used to offer piglets. And also
Yes.
in Egypt, they used to do certain things like that. And dogs and a donkey, too. So,
Yeah.
but it's interesting that the animals that are for the sacrifices in the temple, like all the non-scavenger animals, the regular um, but the other countries also have sheep and they had, cows and stuff. Then I say, what's the difference then? The difference is in the manner they kill them. They will put the animal on the altar. So in the temple, you will do it north of the altar. There will be a distinction always, even if the same animal, even if the ritual is similar, there will always be a contrast. I think understanding the contrast will set everything apart, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, I think that you're right. Yeah.
So Kipuru, going back to the original thought here that I kind of got you off of it. It's difficult to talk about just only one aspect of it. It's so broad.
Yes, it certainly is. And now, in Akkadian, uh, I'll just read. This is actually from the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary.
Okay.
And so this is from the K volume. And so there's just a couple pages on it. So I can just read a note or two about this, is that Kipuru, which is the causative form, means to wipe off, to clean objects, to rub, or to purify magically. Okay, and so that's the abstract meaning that's most important. And clearly, what is important here is the magical part. And so, for example, and what this dictionary has done is it gives you uh, when this was published, so probably 50 years ago, this particular volume, I think it was one of the early volumes published, they the writer would have cards from every attestation of the word, and they would put them together, and then they would put them in the publication. So there's about 10 different notes about sentences. So for example, wiping off, and you can do it in medical texts. You would have the same word to clean objects, and so it's a purification, but it's
Oh,
a physical purification, and that's very common. Um, it's also the word for rubbing when you have to rub something, and of course in English you can rub something on and you can rub something off.
correct.
Uh, you know, but then it's uh, but it's also to purify magically. And so here's a couple sentences. Um, and by the way, these are almost always put in manuals for the religious technician. Okay, usually the incantation priest, and they are often in these Namburbi rituals that I mentioned, or the Makala rituals, which are anti-witchcraft, or the Shurpa rituals, which are um, uh, also burning. They're burning rituals, but they're for sin purification, interestingly enough. And this fellow Geller, in an article, has connected it to the ritual in Leviticus 5 of all places.
Yeah, Sham?
Yes, and so I've got the article on. It's supposed to come to me. It didn't come within time. I ordered it a week ago, but anyway. Um, So it says you perform the appropriate exorcistic ritual, then you purify the person, and then they'll get well. And so, so you're sick, you've got a particular problem. Two different types of medical professionals will come in to help you. You'll have the garden variety doctor, the Azu, or the incantation priest, the Ashipu. By the way, they were not separate in terms of their duties, but the Ashipu priest was more of an incantation priest. And so you find out, oh, I've got this skin problem. And the Azu priest, uh, he can do with a doctor, he might be able to do something with that and perform and daub something on it. But if you don't deal with the spiritual issue behind it, it's going to continue happening. So the Yeshipu priest comes in and he'll perform a particular ritual. And by the way, what your responsibility is ridiculously complex. You'll usually have to let's say you were bitten by a snake, you would probably have to create some type of a clay uh, rendition of a snake, put it out in the field somewhere, perform a very detailed ritual, maybe over 3 days or a week, cleanse your house, perform other purifications. But by the way, all this is going to cost you a lot of money, by the way,
Yeah.
with no insurance. Uh, and
Sounds
so
like the medical insurance now today.
Oh yeah, but it's probably on steroids. And you also so you can purify people. The king is purified. It's called a Bit Rimke ritual, which is basically the cleansing house ritual. Um, and then you can clarify. By the way, you do the same thing with temples.
Yeah.
Uh, the exorcist purifies the temple with the carcass of a sheep, interestingly enough, in one of these rituals. This is in the Assyrian period. Morning rituals, same thing. And so almost everything is done with with this term. Um, and by the way, even women are sometimes exorcist priests, or she can perform some sort of magic ritual. In the Hittite situation that you talked about, there was actually a title for a woman who performed some of these rituals. She was simply called Old Woman. And it's assumed that she probably was, of course, beyond childbearing age. And so, what does she have to do now? Oh, she can now participate in religious tradition. I don't think we have anything precisely like it in Mesopotamia that I
Do
know
you,
of.
do you think that this is the reason why in the Torah God does not have women priestesses? Because the perception of these weird divination and, in some cases, temple prostitution, depending on what country.
Yeah, I think that is my educated guess is that
Yeah.
because of the issue of temple prostitution and the like, then it was something that was forbidden, a forbidden vocation for women because of the connotations.
So, um, adding a little bit to the word Kipuru here, and
Yes,
from the Akkadian and from the Mesopotamia, right? Means to purify. The Bible uses the same language.
yes.
Um, to atone. Basically, it's not to take anything away per se.
Yeah, I mean, the original meaning of that's where I get really perplexed. And that's where this is now entering into theology, which is uh, my joke is that's the taboo part for me. But still, um,
Why is that? Why is that?
well, just because it's out of my specialty,
I
and
gotcha.
words, and again, my joke is, and how am I going to speak, authoritatively on it? Um,
I like that area. I like to make the connections.
No, I know you do, and that's why this is why it's so interesting and so stretching for me because I've got to
Yeah.
try to figure out, well, all right, what does this actually mean then? So, um, yeah, I already lost my point. So
I'm sorry.
oh no, but no, I lost it. You didn't lose it.
Yeah.
Uh, so, uh, where was I? So
About the word Kipuru and the
oh,
similarities and whether
yeah,
it took anything away. It only,
well,
cleanse.
well, yes, it's cleansing. I suppose it's cleansing in the sense that you're wiping it off, whatever it is. And so I suppose you could look at it from that standpoint. I've got a sin. I can actually see it. This is, wiping it off and it has to be taken somewhere.
I got okay. So when you go to Hebrews 9 and the writer is making a point of saying because the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of red heifer did not do this. They're
Yes.
actually correct because the temple service was not designed to do away with death. It was something to
Right.
purify the temple so the relationship could be continued.
Right. Yeah, yes, because if that wasn't done, there could be no relationship at all.
Right.
But you're right. And of course, you look at it in traditional Judaism, if you ask them, well, what's the end game of this? I mean, do we just keep on doing this until the end of time or what? And of course, as believers, we're saying, no, 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 there's a stopping, there's a point where God, you know, that ends this with he transcends it with what is discussed in the book of Hebrews.
Okay, so if
So we don't have to face death. That's the whole point. You're right.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Do you think that the system of religion is removed for the lack of understanding of these words, what they mean, and making the connections? They assume because 40 years after the resurrection of the Messiah, the temple was still functioning and no one ever
Right.
said anything against it. So
Yeah.
clearly, James and Peter and John and any of those guys had an issue with the service because they understood the reason why the resurrection meant, and I think it's there for us. It's just that we're not in tune with the language. Um, the writer of the Hebrews, I think, did a great job expounding on the contrast between God's way of removing death versus the function of the type. What would allow you to continue the relationship is a purifying of humanity, in
Right.
this case, a yearly. Um, that's quite interesting. You know what really caught my interest in regards to this topic is the word kofel, which is one of the words that come from kapoet. It's all connected with the same root word, but they seem to be used differently in the Bible. And let me read from here Baker's commentary. I don't know how you feel about that one, but it says beyond the literal meaning of the physical covering, the metaphorical meaning of the verb is far more reaching. For example, kofel signifies a bribe or a ransom, which can metaphorically attempt to cover an offense. So the offended is God, the offender is Israel, the people, humanity. But yet God is willing to exchange to restore the offender. It's beyond my understanding.
Yes.
Why would God, the offended party, is willing to still bring some kind of ransom, his son, so that we can be in good standing with him? I don't understand why he
That's
would do that.
Yeah, that's that. I think, I mean, you think about it, you've just sort of hit the whole core of our belief system, right? Right between the eyes is right there. Is
Yeah.
like, what did the hymn writer write? Charles Wesley, amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, should die for me? It's like, what, how does this work?
Yeah. It's,
It doesn't make any human sense. And of course, that's the whole point. It doesn't make sense. And so why would, here's the basic question that any human can ask is, why would God go through with all of this? Why would
but
he do this for us?
you know, I think we get a glimpse of that in the story of Moses when he went to the mountain after Israel worshiped the golden calf. And Moses says, hey, blot me out.
Yeah,
He was willing to be the ransom to forgive Israel. And then God says something very interesting. I will forgive those that I want to forgive. I'm paraphrasing.
yeah,
In other words, there was a ransom that God can provide to deal with that type of thing because idolatry was death. The
yeah,
penalty was death.
yeah. And so, yeah, and of course, the relationship between Moses and God is so fascinating because Moses clearly, you know, he, how can I say this? He's very irritating in many respects, especially
Yeah.
at the outset with God. And so, very human. It's easy to relate to with Moses. That's for
It,
sure. So what's that root again? What's the triradical root, Kofel? Is it Q or K?
uh,
Because I want to look that up.
let
It's
me share here real quick. I have some people who speak Hebrew doing research and helping me with this.
that.
Uh,
No.
Kipel, Kufel.
Oh, so it's the same root.
Yeah, it's the same root.
Okay, all right. Okay. I was trying to figure out, you know, uh, so it's the same root, and so it just shows that it has a wider semantic range um, uh, than that. Okay, yeah, right. It's the now. By the way, so in fact in Akkadian, the the generic root kaparum can mean I suppose it's really still means to wipe more than it means to cover. And so even with Genesis 6:14, that means that you're wiping pitch on something.
Right.
And this is, I had forgotten about this. So I did all my, my early archaeology was at a site in Syria called Terka, and with the tablets there, uh, a lot of the administrative tablets had a very interesting phrase is that um, if you and I were making a transaction, let's say buying or selling a field, and at some point one of us is going to argue against the terms of the agreement and we're doing it unfairly, uh, and if we were convicted for it, it says that we would pay a heavy fine, and then our head would be kupurued over with hot bitumen.
Ah,
So we would,
interesting.
so they would, and it only happens at Turkey, as far as we can tell. It must have been a local cultural thing where they would basically what you're doing is you're smearing it. Now, in this case, of course, you're smearing it on. You're not smearing it off.
Right.
um, or wiping it off, I should say. And so, yeah, I'm fascinated by it.
You know what's interesting? The in Genesis 6:14, it uses the word kofel, but then when it talks about the basket, in Genesis, in Exodus, and then now, it's that she corded a basket. She corded it with tar and
Yeah.
with pitch.
Yes.
But it uses a different word there.
Well, and
Bitumen.
that's,
It uses
yeah,
bitumen.
yes. And that, of course, that's, I mean, there, I suppose they have to use that word because otherwise the basket wouldn't float. And so they have to use the word that you use. I mean, you know where we find tar and bitumen all the time is in pottery. A potter, they make a pot, there's a crack in it, they would
Okay.
put the tar in it. And so we would find that all of the time in our excavations. Um,
Would you see the story of the flood now as a story of resurrection and atonement, because he's using the word kofel, which is a ransom.
Yeah, I would say that it's certainly a type.
Yeah, kind
It,
of interesting.
and so, in other words, but I think the Bible does that all the time where it
Yeah,
really,
it's consistent.
they'll say a word here or a phrase here, and then you'll see it, hundreds of chapters later, and you're supposed to remember it. I mean, it's really, you think about it. Um, the easiest example I can think of is, of course, is the story in Genesis 19 about Lot and the angels, and then the same phrases are used in Judges 19 when the Levite and his concubine are surrounded, and you're thinking, all right. And of course, the ending is different because people were ignoring God in Judges. That was the whole point.
Right, right. So
Anyway,
when it comes to Kipuru or the
yes.
atonement, so do you think the word atonement really does justice to the word at all in English?
I don't know. I mean,
Hope
what
I'm
you,
asking good questions because I'm very intrigued by this topic, and it's really
yeah.
blowing me away how much I'm learning.
Well,
And
yes, because I'm trying to think of okay, the word atonement. Do you have the same root in Spanish? I know it's a French word. And
uh,
so, I
I
mean,
mean, expiación is
but it's a different word,
a
isn't it?
different word. I mean, perdón, it's like a pardon. It's more
Right.
like,
Okay. So, I mean, so, of course, in English, you know, uh, because the French aristocracy was used so much in England, we have so many, much of our Latin root comes through French in
right.
English. And
Yeah.
And so atonement comes through French, and I'm trying to remember what the original meaning of the word is, but I'd have to look it up. But what do you think about it? If you atone for something, it means that you have to do something to make it right. But I don't know whether that's a perfect fit for what we're talking about here. It
I
doesn't.
don't think so either. That's why I'm
Yeah.
so intrigued by the word, because I'm thinking they're using the English word atonement. But when I look into the Kipuru, when I look into Kofel, and I look into the Kippur or Kippel, it's like we're getting a different message here that we're missing. Maybe that's why we don't understand in its fullness the work of Messiah in the New Testament.
And 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 I guess the only thing I can say, and again, I haven't studied this, but in terms of theology, and maybe you're going to be the one to come up with this. I just don't know what word to use if I don't use atonement. You know what I'm saying is that
Well, let me
that
submit this to you. Let me show you. I found this in my research in the book of, it's actually in Acts 3. I mean, in Romans 3. In Romans 3, Paul is talking about, um, I always intrigue me this verse 20, 24. Okay, let me put that, let me share the screen here. I hope I'm not taking you off the topic.
oh,
I appreciate
that's all
appreciate you
right.
giving me the leeway, to dialogue with you on this, because to be honest with you, is sometimes it's difficult to dialogue with other people because we all come with our own preconceived notions about what we think instead of just having the dialogue and trying to find the answer.
Yes.
And in Romans chapter 3, verse 21 says, "But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God have been revealed, being testified about by the law and the prophets. That is, the righteousness of God through faith in Yeshua Messiah, to all who believe. For there is no distinction," right? So it's talking about the equity of God. It says, "For we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." Now, in chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, he talks about how through the last Adam now we are now have life. So the essence is life It's about death, right? How God defeated death. But watch this. It says, being justified as a gift by his grace through the redemption. And guess what's the word here?
What is it?
Apolotrosis, which
Yes.
is the one that if you look it up in the it tells you is the language of someone paying to release you from slavery,
Yes.
which
Now,
is huge.
yeah, which is fascinating to me because my first thought would be that I'm that in Hebrew the word would be, this is more of a secular thing, but deroer is the word that they use for the redemption, isn't it? Even
Yeah,
the
but that's the one that's used for the word aphesis,
Oh, okay,
for
interesting.
remission.
Okay, that's
That
what
word,
I'm.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. You're correct. The roar, which is Deuteronomy 15, right?
yes,
The releasing of debts
and
and
there's
Exodus.
yes, and there's an
Yeah.
Akkadian an Akkadian root under Arum, which I wrote an article on that is connected to that.
Hey, I
But
haven't read that article, so I'd like to read that article.
oh,
Isaiah 61 also quotes that word and that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me too.
right, okay, that's which is really interesting.
So check this out. Let me see if I can make it more interesting for you. It
Okay,
says, verse 25 says, whom God made publicly available as the mercy seat. It's
now
using Yom Kippur language.
yes, is that the hilasterion or
I think so. Let me see. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
You see, so it's using Yom Kippur language to convey how we've been purchased, released from what? From death. The
yeah,
next chapters talk about that. So if we do not understand the purpose of atonement or Kipuru or Kippel, we're not going to see the contrast of Yom Kippur.
yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so I'm blowing a theological head gasket now, trying to figure this out. And so I'm probably spilling all over the floor here.
But I
But
have a question for you in regards to ancient Near East. It's
okay,
like when the Kipuru, was it used in any way as an exchange or like a ransom?
I I can't think of it off the top of my head, especially when I'm leaking. But I'm and this is where I'm gonna refer you to that article by Joanne Skurlock
Yeah, I
about
haven't had a chance to read it. I'm
no,
sorry I didn't do my homework.
no, not a problem. Um, Techniques of the sacrifice of animals. And so here I'm on page 29, and she talks about the fact there's just about the issue of blood, but I'm trying to remember whether there's anything. I mean, for them, it's, if I can use the technical term, apotropaic,
Oh, it's rare, yes.
and so it's removing the problem from them. And so I suppose it's intrinsically similar to that. Because of course, so what is on us? It's the penalty of death that's being taken away from us. Okay. And
That's exactly what Hebrews 2 says.
yes. And so
Hebrews, wait a minute, you just mentioned something really cool because that's exactly what Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14, 15 says.
look at that.
It says, therefore, since the children share in blood and flesh, he also in like manner share in the same things in order that through death he could destroy the one who has the power over death, that is the devil, and could set free these who through fear of death were subject to slavery throughout all their lives. That's
Yeah.
almost the same context what you said.
Yeah.
Removing that fear.
Yes. Yes. Removing the fear and uh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so in other words, the idea of removal is certainly in Mesopotamia, but they certainly don't go to this point that you are going to be removing. In other words, for Mesopotamia, you have to be constantly doing these things to be removing the impurities that are in your existence, whether it's myself or everything around me. And it's such an all-encompassing job. It probably makes me obsessed with it. But to go to that next step of of the divine being participating in in it by being the sin bearer, as it, that would be incomprehensible because of the whole nature of why we were created. We were created to be slaves to do all the dirty work the gods didn't want to do, and so
So you think maybe that's why the writer Paul is constantly connecting the Messiah with the last Adam, making that contrast why he came in the flesh,
yeah,
because he had to come in the same form in which men fell.
yeah,
It's like going in the reverse.
yeah. That's like an unwritten law that makes sense. Is that if you're going to be the if I can use the word atonement because I can't use it, if I
Yeah, I
use
don't
the
know what else to
term,
use.
if you're going to be the ransom, you have to be of the same kind, I suppose, as what that means.
Well, I
And that's
mean,
of course what he is. In other words, he's very, very human and very, very divine, whatever that means. And of
so okay, so let's talk a little bit about that because that's kind of interesting. So, in order to receive that type of remission or ransom or atonement, whatever we want to use, Kipuru, um, I noticed a pattern with Noah, with Abraham, and in the Torah that God requires men to be righteous and perfect, which means
yes,
moral,
blameless. Yes.
blameless.
Yeah.
So could we say then that Messiah coming and living a moral and righteous life basically prove to everyone, humanity, that men can live according to the standards of God, and then he would justify you.
Yes, and that they can, or that or that he could, and so because he did it, then he's pronounced what we already know that he really is. He's pronounced the Son of God. In other words, he now has that official title because he did it. He was tempted and you know
Yeah.
every test he passed with flying colors. And whereas we humans, normal humans, we could not do that.
Dude, this I think this type of topic it becomes so broad because then all the things starts to make more sense. Like the way you were reading there about how they're using different animals and they're putting blood on the doorpost. So I guess the similarities are more closely related to the Bible than even believers want to admit.
Well, they are, but again, the meaning, as we've said with everything else, the similarities are remarkable, but they're superficial
Right.
because the meaning behind the ritual is different. You think about it. If I'm a divine image bearer and God made me to, uh, to be the caretaker of the earth and to have a relationship with him, that's so dramatically different than in Mesopotamia, where we're basically, like I said, created to do all the dirty work.
Yeah, to be slaves.
And so and because of that, the fundamental basic meaning is so completely different, even though the actual mechanisms, the rituals behind them, they look alike. That's why an
Right.
outsider would probably look at that. That's why I said that Jehu could go into a Canaanite temple, a Baal worshiping temple, and probably perform rituals and look just like them. Um, but of course, this is why Israel ends up being so different, you know.
Yeah. I think it's to whom, for example, now in the spring in the ancient world, as you know, was the time of life, which was, everyone understood it was the resurrection motif in the spring. And now it makes me realize, now I know why Messiah died and resurrected in the spring. I mean, why not in the winter? Why not in the fall? Whatever. It had to be in the spring because everyone knew it was the time of resurrection motif.
Yeah, exactly
You
right.
know, that's, I'm just, my mind is trying to comprehend because I know that what you bring to the table is something that could, to so many people, can be a little bit confusing. They assume that the Bible was written in a vacuum, like there was nothing else going on, and it was hard for me in the beginning when I began to study ancient Near East trying to reconcile. Wait a minute, everything's the same. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
So I began to study the differences instead of everything being the same,
Yeah.
you know? So how did you deal with that when you started?
Well, when I first started doing this, I was on fire. I mean, I, I remember taking one of the only Bible classes I ever had was a New Testament class at a secular school, at Cal State Northridge. Wasn't even called Cal State Northridge yet, by the
Uh,
way, but it was, and I had a Catholic priest who was our professor, and he was nicest fellow, but he was liberal. And of course, Catholics don't look at scripture in the same way anyway, in terms of authority. And so,
yeah,
he would say things like, "Oh, Jesus probably didn't say this particular passage," and I thought, "Oh, this is ridiculous. I'm going to completely undermine and get rid of this entire structure of liberalism." But then as I went into it, I realized, oh, they actually really work hard at trying to understand these things. And most of the time they could care less what what it means religiously or not religiously. And so like you've learned, oh, they're just trying to do their job, most of them, not all of them, of course. And so I realized, oh, this is a real world. It's as you learned, very intimidating at the beginning.
yeah,
Uh, when you find something and say, oh boy, this looks just like this. How could this happen? Why do these laws look like this? Um, and when I began to understand, and one of it, by the way, was reading Kaufman's Religion of Israel, where he tried to show, yes, they all look alike, but the meaning behind it is different.
yeah,
I have that little condensed volume that Kaufman wrote. Um, but if you look at it from that standpoint, then you're not going to be intimidated by it. And the other thing, maybe even more important, is wait a minute. Um, as long as I'm keeping my eyes on God while I'm
right.
doing this, it's like, I don't understand this, God. What do I do about it? And he's going to pat me on the back. Yeah, you're not going to understand that. Just keep
That's
your eye,
true.
buddy.
You know what helped me? I remember one time I came into that, fork in the road and I needed to make a decision because I was a little confused in that I was not looking at the core issue of ancient Near Eastern history versus the Bible's evidence. So I remember Wayne Feld's book on righteousness and justice. One of my students sent it to me, and I began reading it to him. He quoted Psalm 180, I mean 89:14. Righteousness and justice is the foundation of God's throne. And when we do the Amidah, the morning prayers, one of the prayers is, righteousness and justice. So I'm thinking, then I asked this question: what is the definition of righteousness and justice according to God's worldview, not mine?
Yeah.
And that's when I understood the difference between the Hammurabi Code and the Torah, the laws of Eshnunna and all that stuff. All the ancient documents. I'm going like, oh, God as the King, He is righteous. He executes righteous judgment. Let's learn what they do compared to what the Torah says. And now that was what really did it for me.
Yeah. And then everything else, I would say, falls into place, at least in terms of this model. It doesn't mean that things aren't confusing, because
Yeah,
the deeper
yeah,
you go into the weeds, there's more confusion. But at the beginning, it is very intimidating. And then, of course, when you find somebody at the beginning uh, of this journey, I have to realize that's where I was. And so I'm going to try to be as sympathetic as I can and say, yeah, I understand how you feel that way. I understand why you would think that way. Um, let me give you a few ideas as to, where you could go with this. I constantly would have
yeah,
students in my office and say, what do I do with this? You know, this is stretching this is hurting my faith. I said, what's your faith based on? Is it based on your understanding of ancient Near Eastern parallels? I hope not. Uh,
yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's sometimes we're trying to accommodate or trying to put God in our box of understanding, and I have to throw that box a long time ago. Lastly, one more question, if I may. Mrs. Smith has a good question. I think we should address it. It says, so will you say then that we are justified by the blood? Yes. And the penalty of death removed, then our walk removed, then our walk in our to walk in our sanctification. I would agree with that. I mean, remove the enmity of the law is not the law, it's death.
Yes, exactly.
So I guess removing death and the blood becomes the agent that guarantees the restoration of the covenant and wiping away, or what is instead of wiping a ransom in exchange. Wow, that's pretty powerful to think that now, if death is removed from us and we believe in resurrection, then we're able to move in confidence no matter what because we have the hope that no one has.
Right. And then of course what it is, it's the permanence of death that has been removed from us. And
Yes, right.
because we
Yeah,
still die, but we have the deed is in our hand,
yeah,
that tells us, and of course the Holy Spirit is that seal, which of course causes us to be, well, he's the purifying agent that
right.
is with us, and that's
That's
why,
what Ephesians 1 says that too. Ephesians 1:13 and
yes.
14, that he's the seal until the day of our redemption. That's a
And
down payment, as a matter of fact.
yes, exactly, a down payment, because of course, technically speaking, we're not saved yet. It hasn't, we've got the down payment so we can be confident.
You're going to get in trouble.
Well,
Don't say that too loud. I
yeah,
agree with you. I agree with you that actually that Romans chapter 10, verse 9 and 10 tells you, you shall be saved. If you do this, you shall be saved.
yes, yes. And of course, what does it mean? When, where, and how, and what is, and all that. Um, and of course, in 2 Corinthians 5, at the end of it, when Christ became sin, clearly that means sin bearer. That's a euphemism for sin bearer because,
That's true. Oh, I got something to show you. Wait
okay.
a second. You see, when I talk to you, you make my brain, move here. Wait,
My,
wait, wait.
my
Ephesians, right?
God. Yeah.
Check this out. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 13 says, in whom you also, when you read the words of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also you believe, when you believe, you were sealed with the promise of Holy Spirit, who is the down payment
Yeah.
of our inheritance until the redemption of the possession to the place of his glory. Wait a minute. The word redemption is,
There it is. Okay, good. Interesting. Payment by ransom.
it keeps lining up.
So that hasn't happened yet.
That
That
hasn't happened yet. We're
yeah,
sealed.
but it will happen. And why will it happen? Because one of my favorite verse in Hebrews is I have to use the King James 7:25. He is able to save us to the uttermost. And of course, it means that God has the power and the ability, and he's also trustworthy to do it. Because if any of those weren't true, it would break everything down. If
Yeah.
and so, oh wow, you got me into theology again, and my head hurts.
I
Um,
like it. I like doing that to you. Um, Professor, listen, man, I'm very grateful. Thank you for the opportunity to exchange with you and bounce these things. And I'm trying to learn more. I really, truly want to keep learning and researching. And you're helping me for accountability, also for the right sources, to go in and try to do the right thing. So appreciate it. Do you think there's a lot more we can cover on this later?
uh, Perhaps, I don't know. It depends on what area you want to go into. So we'll have to discuss that. I am going to bring up my podcast that is now up and running, the Buried Bible Podcast,
Very.
Buredbible podcast. And so
Where
uh,
can we find that? Is that on YouTube or?
it's on YouTube and other podcasts, and et cetera. I know if you look at my Facebook, I think it comes up. There actually is a Facebook Buried Bible podcast.
Buried.
Buried Bible. I didn't come up with the name. I basically, all I get to do is talk. My, my
That's funny.
my buddy Keegan and my kids are the ones that are doing everything else, and I just get to say,
Oh,
uh,
okay, I see. Here it is.
yeah.
Buried Bible.
So we've already got 9 episodes up and about 25 shorts
Is
because
this
you're supposed,
is
yeah,
this the
that's
one
it.
right here?
That's it. Yep. So
Oh,
anybody can go to it. It's all
yeah,
free.
guys, make sure you go. I'm gonna put the link right here for you guys. Support the podcast. Go check it out and share it with others. Let's help Professor get the message out. I'm hoping that he will continue to have more students now that he's retired. We want to keep him busy.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I've got in terms of numbers, I have more students now than I ever did, but
Well, that's a good thing, right?
no, it's a great thing. Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm able to help you with that, to get you more people to study with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. No.
You should do a course via Zoom.
Well,
Do it. I mean, you taught, how many courses do you have compiled in all your and your
I
whole?
probably had a rotation of about a dozen or so.
There you go. That's 12 courses.
Yeah. Um, and so yeah, yes, and
Not a bad idea. I sign up. I'm signing up if you do it. Because no, seriously, think about it. Do you realize the importance of, I mean, ancient Near Eastern history has tremendously helped me. And as you know, all the talking that we do and the way we
yeah,
exchange, and our relationship has really developed because I have a foundation, not as in depth as yours, but I have a foundation that we can communicate. So we can expand a little bit more. And if we continue to develop this type of conversation, the audience is going to start making the connections, and I think they'll get it, but they need to be taught.
yeah, and once they do it, then they can there's a lot of stuff, especially now with the resources that you can do on your own. You know that through the Logos
Yeah.
platform. Just so much stuff out there that wasn't even there even 20 years ago
That's true.
on
I mean,
key.
I've been in this research right here. I was able to go through it based on a question that I asked myself, start going through all these words. In 1 hour, I was able to have together that one of the teachings I'm going to be doing on my temple course.
Yeah, that'll be great.
At least the information.
Yeah.
So when are you doing the course? Come on, let's set a date. Let's get it going. I don't play around, brother.
Yeah, I guess not. You're a mover and a shaker, mostly
Yeah, man, we're going to get you going. Once you set up the dates and you want to do it, let me know and we start promoting it for you.
okay.
Hey man, you don't teach for in a secular university for so long and then retire and not have the opportunity to continue to share with people what you learned.
Well, that's what I'm doing with a podcast and with you,
I know.
and I've been doing there've been a few other podcasts I'm doing, and so who knows?
Well, we'll get you going. All right. I'll be a Dodger fan for a day if you do the course.
I
We love you, my friend. Thank you for your time.
love you too. It's been great.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
let me know what you want to do next week. You pick the topic. We continue to do it.
All right, we'll talk.
All right. Shalom, buddy.
All right, go
Go
Dodgers.
Yankees. Hey guys, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to be always available to share with you what I'm learning and the resources that God is allowing me to learn from. Please continue to go to Professor Chavalas Facebook, sign up, ask him to be a friend, ask him questions via email, whatever. We have to take advantage of resources like that. I'm blessed to have great teachers. And not only the Lord's given me favor, thank God, to be able to have access because I truly want to learn. I want to share with you. Remember, the Spanish community do not have the sources the English-speaking world has, and I think this is the Lord training me in order to take it to the people who don't have it. So keep us in your prayers. Go to my website, wisdomandtorah.com. Consider joining the website to study with me. I have a weekly teaching. Go to Facebook and also stay on my YouTube and share with others. And may the Lord bless you and keep you guys. We'll see you next week.